Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and another video about the taming of the shrew. I want to delve into some language analysis for this video, in particular looking at Petruchio's speech from three acts of the play, Act 1, Act 2 and Act 4. That's not to say that he doesn't have some interesting passages in other parts, but these are some key sections. This video is aimed at A-level students who are studying the play as part of their Aspects of Comedy course. But of course, you might be studying the play as part of an undergraduate degree or other course, so you might find this useful as well. For A-level students, of course, you're going to get an extract. That extract might feature Petruchio, in which case I would encourage my students to look carefully at Petruchio's language. And for a second task for A-level, you will also have a second question for the full A-level. So again, you might want to link your essay to the passages that I'm going to talk about in this video. So the key thing with Petruchio, because of the way that he has been created as this sharp of mind, intellectual, eloquent character, he is able to speak figuratively a lot, and that offers students an opportunity to analyse language quite a bit with Petruchio. So do keep a close eye on that. So I'm going to start by talking about Act 1, Scene 2, which is pretty much as soon as we see Petruchio in the play. And as soon as he enters the stage, he asserts his intentions. So the reason why he's come to Padua is because Hortensio, his friend, lives there. So it's a bit of a social call, and he has come from Verona, and he's left Verona because he says it's where small experience grows, which means that he wants to see the world. He's unhappy, he's a bit bored, and he wants to see the world now that his father has died. You can see that in the yellow section there we have the assonance, wive and thrive, which is this almost verb phrase, this process of wiving, meaning that if he can find a wife on his travels, that's going to make his travels even better. So he has this idea already in his head that he wants to use these travels as a way to find a wife. And of course, knowing the play, that's what happens. And the assonance, the sound of that phrase, makes it stand out to us. He says he has crowns in his purse and goods at home, so he's wealthy and materialistic. And again, like I've said in previous videos, this is a play about wealth, it's a play about money, it's a play about stuff and materialism. It's a very macho play, not a particularly romantic play, and it also uses marriage as an institution to make more money. And of course, in this play, Petruchio actually gets 2 dowries plus the money from the wager, so he's raking it in from this marriage theme. The reason why I have highlighted is deceased there in blue is because think of what Grumio does. So Grumio is on stage as well, and Grumio is listening. And in some productions, the Grumio character, the archetypal fool character, who is there for comic relief, will do something to break that seriousness. We have to remember that we're watching a comedy, and we don't want lots of talk of death and suffering, because that's not going to be funny or humorous. So Grumio will often be used, and as well as other minor archetypal fools, to break that seriousness, to keep the audience laughing for that comic relief. So in some productions, Grumio will make a noise, he will sometimes kick a metal bucket in order to create a loud metallic sound, which gets the audience laughing. We've also got 2 metaphors here. He's calling himself, he's saying that he is almost being carried on the wind that scatters young men through the world, almost suggesting that he's likening himself to pollen being carried by the wind. And there's, I suppose, a degree of sexual innuendo here, because this idea of pollinating as he travels with women perhaps. And you've also got the metaphor maze there, meaning a metaphor for life. He's thrust himself into life, with all of its twists and turns and sometimes dead ends. And he's basically taken a chance and a gamble, which is what happens when we go into a maze. We might get lost, we might not, but you have to go in it to tell. So maze is there a metaphor for life. A little bit later, after Hortensio has hinted that there is a woman to be married, and she does come with a significant dowry, he has this monologue, which is full of devices, actually, which shows his strength and dominance. So he wants to be seen as a character that has strength and dominance in this new place where nobody knows him. Of course, Petruchio is the Il Capitano character from the Italian tradition of commedia dell'arte. So that character is going to be showy and macho and dominant, and is going to be a lot about him. And that's shown, for example, through the repetition of the pronoun I here. This is a character who is confident about talking about himself. And that's where a lot of his arrogance, I suppose, comes from, this kind of pretentiousness that he has. To demonstrate the fact that he is a great rhetorician, he uses two devices here, repetition of rhetorical questions throughout this monologue, and also a degree of anaphora here, or anaphora at the beginning. Have I is used 4 times, which I haven't actually highlighted, but that's something to look at as well. So this is a man confident with speaking. He would make a great lawyer or a great solicitor. He's able to construct a rhetorical argument which also sounds very persuasive. And in this monologue, he's using 2 semantic fields, really, one of which is in pink, which is to do with sound, and quiet versus loud sound. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to suggest that Kate is not threatening to him. So she calls her din little, so little sound. And he also says that, compared to hearing lions roar and the sea in a storm and an angry boar, he is not going to be deterred by a quiet woman's tongue. The second semantic field are all underlined, which is to do with war and fighting, which has connotations of heroism and, almost this archetypal warrior figure, demonstrating male ego and pride, machoism, and a degree of kind of pretentiousness. It's suggested, therefore, that Petruchio must have been a soldier at one point, even though we don't quite know when or where. But, and again, he might be making all of this up. We don't know. This might all just be waffle and made-up nonsense. But it sounds legitimate. So he's really using all of this imagery, all this loudness, and all of this war imagery to suggest that he is not going to be conquered by a woman's tongue, which he likens in a simile to the sound of popping in a farmer's fire when you throw chestnuts into it. And he then says, tush, tush, meaning, you men are talking absolute nonsense. I'm not threatened by Kate, even if you are. And he calls them boys, suggesting that they're boys telling tales. They need to basically grow a pair, is what Petruchio is saying. So he's elevating his own sense of manliness and machoism in this section as well. So by this point, of course, this is what he's saying, but we don't know really how realistic it is. We don't know what he's thinking. He might be very, very scared himself. He doesn't know what he's getting himself into, but he is saying this in order to give the impression that he is dominant. But he doesn't really know, I think, at this point, what he's going to do in order to conquer Kate, which links to the idea that he's becoming a soldier figure. He has to become a warrior or a soldier in order to win the battle with Kate. In the following act, we have this idea that he is stood on stage and he's told Baptista to go and fetch his daughter because he's not going to go to her. And this soliloquy is really giving himself a bit of a talking to, bit of a pep talk. He's preparing to meet her for the first time. And this is basically a plan of how he intends to woo her. Again, we've got the anaphora there suggesting a rhetorical argument is being constructed. And we've also, again, got 2 similes, which are to do with nature, and how the pastoral or the rural idyll is used to try romantically and reinforce Petruchio's sentiment, which is if she is angry, I'll tell her that she's like a nightingale. If she looks angry, I tell her that she looks like she's been washed with dew. So he uses two similes here to do with nature. And the significance of that is nature, if you've watched the Blake videos that I've done, is to do with kind of harmony and romance and something that is perfect and clean and fresh. So he's trying to use here similes to reinforce that Kate, he's hoping to find Kate, he's hoping to manipulate her, and hoping that praise will work in taming her. So he's using lots of positive reinforcement here. He says we've got the idea that I'll give her thanks, I'll commend her, I'll crave the day. So those yellow phrases suggesting that this is a man who's prepared to manipulate her slightly and give her some positive comments, even if she isn't really owing of them. She is going to be complimented anyway in order to kind of break her down, he thinks. And towards the end here, where he says, and now Petruchio speak, we've got the caesura there, which heightens that moment of climax when they meet for the first time. And if you just read on a little bit further, when he sees her for the first time, he's actually struck with an awkward silence, which undermines really his command of wooing, and it undermines all of this talk as just hyperbolic waffle. Because when it actually comes down to it, he actually just says to her things like, "Oh, what's your name? Nice to meet you." So kind of more basic things, which go against this kind of quite elevated tone here, elevated register. Following on from this, a bit later in the play, is after he's met her, he basically says to her what his intentions are. The wooing of Kate hasn't gone as well as he had hoped. Perhaps he undermined how shrewish she actually is. But he says, setting all this chat aside, meaning, oh, enough of this nonsense. This is the nub of the matter. So chat suggests something that's unimportant. Actually, it was very important to him because it was his wooing of her, which links to that soliloquy I showed you in the last slide. So the first wooing of her didn't go to plan. And he's basically saying, enough of this. This is the issue. And the issue is that your father has consented that you shall be my wife, your dowry agreed upon, and will you, nill you, I will marry you. So there's a complete lack of choice there. He's going to get what he wants, regardless of what she wants, or regardless of the problems that she's going to put up in his way. She's going to, be a pain to begin with. He's got to just carry on. He's got to be strong and tenacious and resilient. And that's why at the bottom he says, I must and will have Katharina to be my wife. That's very certain. He also says that in this quite nice metaphor, well, nice to analyse for language, he's going to bring her from a wild Kate to a Kate comfortable as other household Kates. Conformable. So he's going to domesticate her. He's going to tame her, and she doesn't have a choice in this. So he's going to bring her from a wild animal to a domesticated pet. And as we know from the ending, that does work to some extent, although we don't know to what extent Kate learns this and just plays him at his own game, as I've said in previous videos. He says, never make denial, meaning I want you to give the impression to your father that you want to marry me too, even though she doesn't. So there's a disparity here between what she actually wants and what's going to happen to her. So that's just at the end of their first meeting, where he outlines what he's going to do, whether or not she likes it or not. And the final thing I just want to look at in this video is the very important soliloquy in Act 4, Scene 1 at the end. I've split this across two slides. This is a really important soliloquy because it outlines to the audience what he wants to do. And we've kind of already had an idea of that, but this is him, being honest and telling us right from the horse's mouth what he intends to do. he says, for example, thus have politically begun my reign. And you've got the abstract noun reign there, suggesting power and monarchy. So reign is to do with monarchy and power, and if you think of Kate's monologue, which I will analyse in a separate video, that links to some of the terms that she uses to describe husbands more generally, thy king, thy sovereign, and so on. So she picks up on that maybe. Begun, the verb begun suggests that he's only just started, so as an audience we think, good gracious, what else is he going to do? And the adverb politically there means cleverly or slyly. So kind of with justification, he's going to kind of carry out this plan that he has. Of course, it's because they don't recognise this word. We've also got in this red section the metaphor which is to do with falconry. And the metaphor which is to do with Kate being this untamed haggard who is being trained to come back and fly back to her master. So as I've said in a previous video for Shrew, falconry and domestication of animals is a really important theme in this play because it foreshadows Kate's transformation as a human being within marriage. And he basically says that I'm the keeper of this falcon. I've got to spend the time training it in order to help it learn to fly back to me. And the way that's done is to not give her any food. Because if he is the only place where she can get food, then she's going to have to keep flying back to him to get that food, which is why falconry shows they put meat on the glove of the falconer, so the bird comes back for the food. So it's this idea, this kind of metaphor of falconry, which is quite important and which students often refer to actually in their essays. You've also got the alliteration bait and beat. That's quite a harsh sounding, what's called a plosive sound. So it's to do with disobedience and this idea of almost aggression, which he's trying to get out of her. And in the declarative sentence there in the green, basically very simply, she hasn't eaten any meat today, she hasn't eaten today, she won't, and she hasn't slept either, and she won't. So he's basically depriving her of the fundamentals that we need in order to survive, which is food and rest. We can't go long without either as human beings. And that's going to disorientate her, and it's also going to make her desperate to comply. If she's going to get sleep and if she's going to get food, she has to comply with him. Otherwise, there's going to be a consequence. And those consequences are expressed in the second half of the soliloquy. For example, he intends to stay up all night, and as soon as she starts to nod off, he's going to start shouting and start to throw the pillows and the covers around so she can't sleep. That's in that kind of top bit there. And he says he's going to find some undeserved fault, meaning he's going to make up a reason why she can't eat the meat. Maybe it's burnt. Well, he's already done this in Act 4, Scene 1 when they get back from Padua. Maybe it's burnt, maybe it's undercooked. He's going to make up a reason why she can't eat it and make out that it's in her best interests that she can't eat it. And that's what happens with the hat and the gown. He makes up the fact they've been made poorly in Act 4, Scene 3. They haven't, they're absolutely fine. So he's making things up as he goes along very opportunistically and resourcefully as well. And he's basically then saying to himself, well, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm taking care of her. So this could be in the purple section here, manipulative. It might be he's in denial. He might be a lunatic, or he might be genuine. Is he a bully or not? Is this just an act? And he's going to say that the reason why he's doing all this is because he's taking reverent care of her. And he's going to make sure that she is absolutely loved and looked after, and is going to invest time into making her a better person. You've also got this almost oxymoronic phrase, kill a wife with kindness, and the alliteration of that cuss sound there, which is also a plosive, suggests, it stands out to us. But again, this is linking back to that idea of taking her from a wild animal to a domesticated pet. He's going to kill not her, but kill the devilish, kind of disobedient, wild nature of her and domesticate her and tame her. And again, as long as he can justify he's doing it from kindness, perhaps he feels more able to do it, perhaps, if there's a noble reason for it. And then at the end of this soliloquy, in the green there, it's a heroic couplet, which means it's a line of pentameter that rhymes at the end. Pentameter is 10 syllables. And that helps us hear it differently as a kind of a concluding phrase. But it's also spoken to the audience, so it's an aside. He basically asks the audience, anybody got any better ideas about how to tame a wife? And nobody says anything, so he continues. And of course, at the time, this was the way to tame a wife. This is what lots of men in the audience probably would have been doing, or have done, or will end up doing in the time. So it's not an alien concept to them, or even the women in the audience either, who have been tamed. So the soliloquy is important because it sums up from Petruchio's own mouth what he is playing at. And there's, again, lots of lovely language analysis in there that you could use or analyse or explain in your response. So in summary then, we have looked at a number of sections of Petruchio's language. Like I said at the beginning, Petruchio does offer students a wonderful opportunity to analyse language, and just goes to show not only Petruchio's ability to speak eloquently, but also Shakespeare's ability to write in this figurative way, which is something you can definitely pick up on if you wanted to in an exam. So hopefully that has been useful, and good luck with your studies.